Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. Owning lakeside property had always been my dream. After years of hard work and saving, I was finally able to make that dream a reality 3 years ago when I purchased a gorgeous plot of land right on the shores of Lake Michigan. I had plans to build my forever home there one day. In the meantime, I was perfectly content spending weekends in my little trailer on the property. Sitting on the sandy shores with my dog and looking out at the crystal blue waters of the lake was my happy place. The trailer wasn't much, but it was all I needed. Last year, I got an incredible job offer to work overseas for 6 months. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity I couldn't pass up. The timing wasn't ideal, as I had just gotten the permits to start building my home on the lakeside property, but I figured I could pick up where I left off when I got back. I did have some concerns about leaving my vacant property unattended for so long. My neighbor Sam lived in the house next door. He was a nice enough guy, if not a little nosy at times. Before leaving, I asked Sam to keep an eye on the place while I was gone. He assured me it was no problem and that he'd make sure no troubles arose. With that taken care of, I headed off on my adventure overseas. The 6 months passed by in a flash. I stayed busy with my work and tried not to think about missing summertime at the lake too much. A week before I was set to fly home, I gave Sam a call. "Hey there, neighbor. Just wanted to let you know I'll be back next week. How's everything looking at the property? No troubles, I hope?" I asked casually, not expecting anything out of the ordinary. "Oh yeah, everything is fine. Yeah, no problems at all," Sam replied, sounding caught off guard. I brushed it off, assuming he had just forgotten I was coming home already. We exchanged goodbyes and I went back to packing. The flight home was uneventful, but the anticipation of getting back to my lakeside property had me giddy. I hired an Uber to take me straight there from the airport. As the car pulled down the sleepy gravel road leading to the lake, I caught the first glimpse of it glimmering through the trees. Except something seemed off. Rather than one building on my property, I could make out two. Squinting, I could see the familiar shape of my small trailer near the shoreline. But closer to the road was a larger structure that definitely hadn't been there before. "Looks like someone's built themselves quite the cabin," the driver commented. My stomach dropped and I felt queasy. What was going on here? The car pulled up at the end of the drive and I got out, staring open-mouthed at the brand-new log cabin-style house sitting on my property. Flower boxes adorned the windows and a welcome mat lay at the front door. It even had a damn porch. Fury simmered inside me as I marched over to Sam's house. I pounded angrily on the door until a surprised-looking Sam answered. "Whoa, you're home early," he exclaimed. "Cut the act, Sam. What the hell is that cabin doing on my property?" I demanded. Sam gulped, his eyes shifting around nervously. "Now just relax, let me explain." He went on to tell me how a few months after I left, his daughter Hannah was visiting from out of state with her husband and 2 young kids. With his house only having 2 bedrooms, he didn't have enough space for all of them to stay comfortably. Supposedly, he remembered I had plans to build on my property eventually, so he thought it wouldn't hurt to build a small cabin for Hannah's family to stay in during their visit. Just a little holiday home, he called it. I was utterly flabbergasted. The audacity and entitlement of this man was astounding. "Are you out of your mind?" I shouted. "You can't just build whatever you want on someone else's property without permission." Sam held up his hands defensively. "I'm real sorry about this misunderstanding. Tell you what, why don't I take care of all the costs and labor to move the cabin off your land onto mine, free of charge?" I scoffed at his pathetic attempt to smooth things over. "Oh, you'll be paying all right, but not just to move it. I want you to pay for the lumber and materials too. And then I'll be seeing your ass in court for illegally trespassing and building on my property." Sam stammered more apologies and excuses, but I'd heard enough. A quick call to the police had 2 officers dispatched to my property, where I showed them documentation proving my ownership. The cabin and its contents were photographed and inventoried as evidence. In the end, Sam got hit with a pile of charges: trespassing, illegally constructing a dwelling, and fraud for lying about having permission to build. I sued him for the full value of the cabin itself, plus the emotional damages from coming home to find my property violated. The whole debacle ended up costing Sam upwards of $80,000 in legal fees, fines, and payments to me. The judge ordered him to remove the cabin at his own expense, so I didn't have to deal with dismantling that eyesore. Sam's daughter Hannah was mortified when she learned her father swindled a neighbor to build her family a cabin. She personally called to apologize profusely to me. As for Sam, he could barely look me in the eye anymore, much to my satisfaction. Building that cabin was a sneaky attempt to take advantage of my property without permission. Maybe now Sam will think twice before trying to walk all over someone and take what doesn't belong to him. In the end, justice was served. Sam got his due punishment while I came out with some nice monetary compensation. The peace of mind I regained being able to protect my property rights made all the legal hassles worthwhile. After all was said and done, I finally resumed my plan to build my dream home on the lakeside land. Every time I look out my window at the shimmering blue water, I'm reminded just how precious this little slice of paradise is to me. No neighbor will ever again be allowed to encroach on what is rightfully mine. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Many years ago, I worked in the lovely career of retail. It's sadly normal for there to be a constant flow of shop scum that make you despise their existence, and there are those that are so horrific that what they do is burned into your mind forever. Fortunately, one of these unforgettable moments allowed me to extract my revenge. I had only worked in retail for 1 year in this newly built store and was starting to settle in. Getting to know the great customers and understanding that some people shouldn't be allowed outside, which being a shy person who hates conflict wasn't the best. But at least one of my customers was an absolutely adorable elderly lady who always made time to talk and was an absolute joy to be with. It had been some weeks since I had last seen her, but one morning, I see her car park into the disabled parking bay, as she already has a blue badge. Only this time she hobbled out of the car on crutches with a pot on her leg. I didn't have chance to talk to her yet when a works truck, which did not have a blue disabled badge, pulled into the disabled space next to her, and out jumped an early 40s builder with their teenage kid. Well, this little old lady was having none of this and must have absolutely massive balls of steel and stood up to this ignorant builder and politely informed them that they shouldn't be parking there as it's for the disabled, and he doesn't have a badge. What happened next I can't forget. This builder decided the best course of action was to humiliate and insult this poor elderly lady in crutches, accuse her of faking her disability and claim the cast on her leg was a fake, and that she probably milks the benefit system for as much money as possible, then walks off putting on an over-dramatic fake limp, laughing away with their teenage kid whilst the old lady stood there in shock. Sadly, being one who lacks courage, I did absolutely nothing about it, and that would stick with me forever. I tried feebly to ask a manager later to do something about it, but they didn't care or want to get involved. For years I worked in this store, always seeing this scum builder come in and out. Fortunately, I never interacted with this scum builder, but I saw them often, and every time I did, I would always remember what they had done vividly. I would still see them park in the disabled bays, and even got to the point where I would recognize them by the large blue Mercedes they drove. 7 years later, I was still working in the store, and this scum was still parking in disabled and looking like an absolute idiot. Yet this year, I was blessed with good fortune, and our store was outfitted with some absolute joyful equipment. Due to the high number of complaints, our store had set up a company to deal with the parking violations, but instead of having external parties coming in and ticketing cars, the staff of the store were given the ticketing machine, and it was our duty to go to the car park and record any cars that violated the parking rules. This was all done digitally, and there would be no paper tickets upon the cars. This was brilliant. As soon as I found out, I knew what I was going to do. It didn't take long for me to learn how to use the machine, and it certainly didn't take long for the opportunity to get revenge, and so it began. There were 3 rules for parking, and if you break these rules, there's a lovely £80 fine in return each time it happened. The first rule, no parking in disabled without a badge. And I know well that the scum builder is certainly violating this rule, and it wasn't long until I saw him next, and as soon as he entered the store, I quickly scurried out with the ticketing machine, and lo and behold, there was the oversized blue Mercedes in the closest disabled bay with no badge. I smashed them car details in with some well-shot photos and sent the report off so that they would receive a lovely letter of their fine they would ask to pay. That's not enough though, but fortunately it takes weeks for them to finally receive the ticket, which grants me the opportunity to constantly ticket their parking violations. Because, as you would expect, the scum would always park in disabled, and as I worked at the front of the store, I would always know when they had parked. After ticketing their car dozens of times, The scum unfortunately learnt their lesson as their oversized blue Mercedes no longer appeared in disabled parking bays. But as you expect, the scum would still be scum, and they would find their new parking space inside child parking rule 2. Don't park inside child parking without a child. Had this scum gotten enough, I thought? Of course not. They haven't learnt their lesson and continue to be a complete wanker and park in the child parking, which we didn't have many spaces for. At this point, I knew all their car details by heart, and would gleefully fill out the ticket machine as I skipped over to their car violating the child parking, and take the photos needed for them, including shots of their cat seats that bear no child seats in them. And as it became routine, this once again carried on a few weeks more of tickets being created, and eventually they start receiving the fines. Fortunately, me being me, I am completely invisible to others, and often looked over, and I have yet to be seen or caught. But as all good things must eventually come to an end, when the scum came into the shop, their blue turd automobile was no longer there in child parking or disabled. Has the scum finally learnt their lesson? Would you be surprised if they had not? As it didn't take me long to find them. Rule 3. You must park inside a marked bay. And what a surprise, the scum still manages to duck this up. They would park over the line, taking 2 spaces up. Well, guess what? That's a job for me and my ticket machine. Trying to park inside taxi parking but can't fit the big-ass car in it? Boom, that ain't inside a marked bay, and ka-ching, another ticket and fine for the have one single wheel slightly over the white line of a bay. Well, guess who technically broke the rule? That's right, Scumbag did. And there goes a few more weeks of fun, until eventually Scumbag runs out of ways that they can possibly break the rules, and our company hires externally to start ticketing cars, so my beloved weapon of justice goes to rest. Now I know what people are probably going to say, that all these fines are not enforceable because of blah blah blah, but I honestly don't care for a few reasons. Firstly, I'm being paid to do this, so either way my time or money isn't wasted. Secondly, it did have an effect as they repeatable changed their parking habits. And thirdly, even if they don't end up paying, they are still going to spend a duck ton of the time and effort trying to overturn them over and over again, having to constantly be harassed by mail. Overall, if all the fines are counted separate and added up, they would have received thousands of pounds worth of fines, building up overtime for being scum. Cherry on the top, about 3 years later, I walk by this piece of scum on the car park and watch as they scream at some innocent dude in a high-vis jacket, accusing them for being the one giving them all parking fines, which put me at peace knowing this must have seriously got to them and cost them to still be raving mad after 3 years. Short version, I give someone many small parking fines, adding up to the thousands of pounds for insulting a disabled lady several years earlier. The next one is a petty revenge story. Background, my ex-boyfriend is very dedicated to public service volunteering and a hard worker. On top of his crazy schedule, he also has a very built physique and is very dedicated to the gym. I found his ability to work hard, take care of his body, all while helping others admirable and physically attractive. A guy that does volunteering and aims to work in public service should be a good guy, right? I often found myself feeling like he never respected my time. He would ask to come over on days where I had classes the next morning. He admitted to pressuring me into sexual activity. Every time I confronted him with my feelings, he would always say, "I'm sorry you feel that way." He said I was ignoring him if I didn't respond to his messages or calls quickly, even if my phone was away. In the past, I was too clingy because I would message him too much and was too demanding by expecting him to take 3 seconds out of his day to message me good morning back. He forgot to get me a Valentine's gift as he had no time, so he gave me a cheap, expired chocolate bar from his car. Eventually, he apologized because he didn't know it meant that much to me and bought me 2 Sour Patch candies and a protein drink. All I asked for was a handwritten note from him. Story: yesterday I slept over at his place. We showered separately. I took 20 mins, he took well over an hour. I had to keep knocking on his door to get him to hurry up as we had plans. He took his sweet time as showering was his alone time, and we missed our date plans as he had to go to the gym. Today I slept over again. I tried waking him up earlier so we wouldn't miss our rescheduled date. He took 2 hours in the shower, and I couldn't go upstairs to knock on the door as his parents were walking around. We haven't met yet. So I had to spend almost 2 hours confined in his room. 1 hour in, I texted and called him informing him of the time. He had his phone in the shower, and said he would hurry up. Half an hour later, he was still in the shower. Another 30 minutes, and he was finally getting dressed. We no longer had time for our date again, so he was going to drop me back as he was getting late for the gym. He seemed surprised that I was angry at him. He said I was exaggerating 2 hours, but I remembered the time and I even sent him time reminders over text. I was fuming in the car and I told him to skip the gym as wasting 2 hours of my time, the second day in a row, was unacceptable. He said that the shower was his me time and he really needed it. He also said he couldn't miss the gym as he had to get bigger. I asked him if the gym was more important than me, and he said we could simply reschedule our date for tomorrow. Eventually, we reached my apartment. He told me to go inside and we could call and talk about my angry feelings. I refused to leave. I told him that he wasted 2 hours of my day, so I would waste an hour of his, and he would have to skip the gym. So I stayed in his car for an hour. He tried to leave, but I raised my voice at him. I told him he was selfish, had no respect for others' time, and that it was unacceptable. I had never raised my voice at him before or done anything vengeful, so he was startled. He disagreed and repeated he was a good person that respected others' time. He said he simply wasn't aware of the time, but I responded with the fact that he had his phone and you can check the time there. He said he lost track of time, but then I told him I even called and texted the time. He went quiet and started crying, pouting, and stomping his legs. He kept repeating, "I've never felt this way. I feel so claustrophobic. I want to go to the gym, please let me go." I refused. I said if he's feeling claustrophobic, he can take a walk around the area, but I wouldn't leave the car for another hour. I also told him he wouldn't be late for work, so he wouldn't die skipping the gym for one day. He cried and said he already missed half of his gym time yesterday, and I told him it was his own fault due to his poor use of shower time. He continued sitting there, pouting and crossing his arms, sniffling and stomping his feet in the footwell. 40 minutes in, he said, "So you really want it to end this way?" I said I was fed up with his behavior, so I was fine either way. He continued crossing his arms and pouting while refusing to apologize. Eventually, I got out of the car and went upstairs while he drove off. I haven't messaged him all day, and he hasn't messaged me either. This guy was my first real boyfriend, my first kiss, my first everything. We've been dating for over 4 months. I don't know if it's right to throw everything away like this, but I also don't really care. I feel so happy with my small victory. Edit. FYI, he is not on steroids. Also, here the hot water doesn't run out. BTW, yes, I dumped him. Update. He saw the post. Spammed me with calls, excuses, apologies for hours. Eventually, I picked up. He said, well, you know, a sub about petty revenge is bound to attract a certain audience. I also did another petty revenge against him. I downloaded a dating app a few hours after we broke up to shove it in his face. Swiped as much as I could and had 200 plus likes on my profile after 20 hours. Only matched with 2 guys, though, so I did the most bare bones icebreakers, nothing else. Obviously, I'm not gonna hop into a new relationship anytime soon, DW. Don't even remember their names. But my ex is pissed and says I cheated on him, LOL. He said he felt sick and threw up. Now he's also trying to bribe me back into the relationship with a brand new Nintendo Switch OLED. Says he's a bad person, hurt me a lot, won't do it again, yada yada. Is also repeating the claim that I am a cheater even though we broke up yesterday. Also, he vehemently denies ever cheating on me. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Near my former place of work was an excellent seafood place named Shelley's. Far better than you would expect from the average strip mall outside. They made amazingly good food. The pasta jambalaya, shrimp louis, and lobster roll were particularly good, and lunch was reasonably cheap, usually $15 with tip if you stayed on the lunch menu. Unlimited bread rolls ensured you would not go hungry, and they were damn good too. One of the waitresses, though, well, she could be a little trying. She must have been over 70, a former smoker, and she took 2 to 3 breaths to ask you, "What do you want to drink?" And a little hard of hearing, a challenge for my softly spoken Australian expat coworker. But she was a fixture, so you bit your tongue and you knew the chef would lay a little extra on your plate and sometimes free dessert, Boston creme pie, house-made. Except for the Karens. They complained and sniggered behind her back, and went to the manager, also an owner, to ask to be reseated. "Of course, let me show you to the patio." Well, Jimmy and I exchanged a look because we knew the patio was only open for dinner. 15 minutes later, they stomped back in to complain that no one came to take their order and they had to head back to the office. And what was he going to do about it? Most people take the hint, lady. Speechless, they sputtered and left. Meanwhile, our waitress wandered by with free pie and the check. Anything else, boys? We're good, Shelley. Thanks for the pie. You boys be good. See you next week. And then she wandered off, still working in the restaurant she started 60+ years ago, now run by her son, the manager. At the time of the incident, P.S. just before COVID, Shelley passed away from emphysema-related problems, 89, working in her restaurant she opened with her husband at age 19, and worked there for 70 years. Her son took over as manager, but she still showed up to work every day, working the lunch hour, sometimes early dinner if she felt good. Wife and I celebrated many events there over the years, including her telling me she was pregnant after 3 years of trying and a miscarriage. Shelley was there for more than a few lunches and dinners. My mate from Australia chipped in to buy her flowers for the funeral when I told him. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.